Do this tomorrow morning. Walk into your kitchen, open your pantry doors, open your refrigerator. Take out the box of instant oatmeal. Take out the loaf of whole wheat bread. Take out the carton of orange juice. Take out the box of Heart Healthy brand cereal. Take all of it out, put it on your kitchen counter and stare at it. Look closely at what you are about to put into your body. Look at the cardboard boxes covered in bright red hearts and bold medical claims approved by national health associations. Now, recognize it for exactly what it actually is. It is not medicine. It is not fuel. It is the absolute, highly engineered biological recipe for muscle wasting, extreme fatigue, and severe insulin resistance. Do not eat it tomorrow. Put it in the garbage. Pay absolute, hyper-focused attention to exactly how your body feels 2 hours after you eat that healthy breakfast. Think about it right now. You eat the bowl of oatmeal, you eat the dry piece of toast, you drink the glass of juice, you feel full, you feel responsible. But exactly 120 minutes later, feel what happens. Feel the sudden, heavy, unmistakable brain fog settling directly behind your eyes. Feel the physical weakness radiating down into your legs when you stand up from a chair. Notice the intense, sudden, ravenous craving for a mid-morning snack, a craving so powerful it feels like a biological emergency. Notice how your energy completely bottoms out, crashing violently before the clock even strikes noon. Think about the sheer exhaustion that forces you to sit back down in the recliner. You think that crash is just what happens when you cross the age of 60. You think that heavy, sluggish exhaustion is just a natural, unavoidable consequence of getting older. You think you are doing everything perfectly right. Your doctor told you to eat oatmeal to lower your cholesterol. You drink the orange juice because you believe you need the vitamin C. You eat the dry toast because for 40 years, you have been absolutely terrified of eating dietary fat. You truly, genuinely believe that you are eating the gold standard of a healthy senior breakfast. You are not. You are eating a massive, unmitigated dessert disguised as medicine. You are starving your physical architecture while simultaneously drowning your endocrine system in liquid sugar. And right now, across 4 distinct, heavily researched layers of metabolic physics, gastroenterology, and ancient history, I am going to show you exactly why your breakfast is destroying your body, and why the most violent, heavily conditioned athletes in the ancient world held the absolute biological cure. Layer 1 is the brutal, undeniable physics of blood sugar. Your healthy senior breakfast, the instant oats, the toast, the juice, the cereal, is comprised almost entirely of one single macronutrient, carbohydrates. It contains virtually 0 structural protein. It contains 0 healthy dietary fat. When you consume carbohydrates without the biological anchor of protein or fat to slow down digestion, your gastrointestinal tract acts like a wood chipper. It takes that processed oatmeal, the baked flour in the toast, and the liquid fructose in the juice, and it instantly, violently converts it into pure glucose. That massive payload of glucose dumps directly into your bloodstream all at once. Your blood sugar does not just rise, it rockets into the stratosphere. It is a violent glycemic bomb going off in your circulatory system. When this happens, your pancreas hits the biological panic button. Elevated blood sugar is toxic to your blood vessels, so your pancreas violently pumps out a massive surge of the hormone insulin to clear the glucose out of the blood and shove it into your cells. But as you age past 60, your cells do not listen to insulin the way they used to. They become stubborn. They become deaf to the signal. This is called insulin resistance. Because the cells are resistant, the pancreas has to pump out even more insulin, shouting louder and louder chemically just to get the doors to open. Eventually, the massive insulin dump works. It shoves all the glucose into your fat cells. And then your blood sugar crashes violently. It plummets below baseline. That is the brain fog. That is the exhaustion. That is the ravenous craving at 10:30 a.m. You are not tired because you are old. You are tired because you forced your endocrine system onto a violent, extreme roller coaster of a massive sugar spike and a devastating hormonal crash before the day even began. You are literally eating your way into prediabetes by 9:00 a.m. And you are doing it with food that came in a box with a heart printed on it. Layer 2 is the physics of your muscular architecture. As you cross the age of 50, 60, and 70, a terrifying biological shift occurs in your muscle tissue. It is a phenomenon called anabolic resistance. When you were 20 years old, you could eat a tiny amount of protein, a single egg, a splash of milk, and your young, highly sensitive muscles would instantly absorb those amino acids and trigger muscle protein synthesis. Your body easily maintained its muscle mass. After 60, that sensitivity is gone. Your muscles become highly resistant to growth signals. To trigger muscle protein synthesis as a senior, you cannot sip protein slowly. You must hit the muscle with a massive, overwhelming pulse of amino acids all at once. Gerontologists and sports nutritionists agree. To overcome anabolic resistance in an aging body, you need a minimum of 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein in a single meal. Specifically, you need a high dose of the amino acid leucine to turn the key in the biological ignition. Look at your oatmeal, look at your toast. Your entire breakfast contains maybe 5 or 6 grams of trace, incomplete plant protein. You are radically, completely starving your muscular architecture at the exact moment of the day when it is most desperate for structural repair. And the human body is ruthless. If you do not feed it the structural protein it requires to run your internal organs and repair your tissues, it will get the amino acids from somewhere else. It will literally, physically cannibalize your own muscle tissue to survive. It will eat your biceps. It will eat your quadriceps. This is called sarcopenia, the physical withering, shrinking, and wasting away of the aging body. You lose your grip strength. You lose your balance. You struggle to get up from a chair. You fracture your hip when you fall. This is not the inevitable penalty of time. This is protein malnutrition disguised as a heart-healthy diet. You are feeding your body cardboard when it is screaming for bricks. To understand the sheer magnitude of the biological fuel you are missing, we have to look back at the most elite, heavily conditioned, violently trained athletes in the history of the human race. The Roman gladiators. When you imagine a gladiator stepping into the Colosseum, you imagine a man who eats massive haunches of roasted meat. You imagine a pure carnivore. Archaeology and forensic anthropology have proven that this is a total Hollywood myth. In 1993, archaeologists excavated a massive gladiator graveyard in Ephesus, Turkey. They analyzed the bone density, the stable isotopes, and the trace minerals in the skeletons of over 70 fighters. The data was undeniable. The gladiators were almost entirely plant-based. In fact, the ancient Romans had a specific nickname for them. They did not call them meat eaters. They called them the Hordeae asterisk, the barley men. The primary fuel that powered the most extreme, lethal, high-endurance physical combat in human history was a thick, dense, boiling stew called asterisk pulse. It was a heavy porridge made of massive quantities of fava beans, lentils, whole unrefined barley, onions, garlic, and heavily drenched in olive oil. They did not fight to the death on a bowl of instant oats and a glass of juice. They fueled extreme physical output and massive muscular recovery with a massive bowl of legumes. The Roman bean bowl was not a peasant food. It was highly engineered, perfectly calibrated, slow-burning biological jet fuel, and they ate it every single day. Now look at the profound, devastating tragedy of the modern food industry. We abandon the ancient, slow-burning, muscle-building fuel of the Roman Empire, and we traded it for a cardboard box manufactured in a factory. In the mid-20th century, modern medicine made a catastrophic error. We became absolutely terrified of dietary fat and dietary cholesterol. We became convinced that an egg yolk was dangerous. We became convinced that olive oil would clog our arteries. The giant, multinational food corporations capitalized on this fear perfectly. They stripped the fat out of everything. But when you remove the fat, the food tastes like dirt. So to make it palatable, they pumped it entirely full of refined sugar and highly processed grains. They took the fiber out of the grain so it would cook faster, creating instant oatmeal. They pulverized the wheat into ultrafine dust so it could be baked into fluffy white and wheat bread. They extracted the sugar water from the orange and threw away the fibrous pulp. And then they printed massive, bright red hearts on the packaging. They told an entire generation of seniors that this was the absolute pinnacle of cardiovascular health. We convinced our elderly population to eat pure, unmitigated carbohydrates every single morning. We convinced them to spike their insulin and starve their muscles. We watched an entire generation wither away from sarcopenia and fall victim to the epidemic of type 2 diabetes, entirely because we told them that a processed grain in a box was safer than the ancient, protein-dense, fat-rich diet of our ancestors. It is one of the greatest nutritional disasters in human history. But the superiority of the Roman bean bowl goes far deeper than just protein. Layer 3 is the mechanical physics of the bean itself. When you eat a massive bowl of lentils or fava beans, you are consuming an enormous amount of a specific compound called soluble fiber. Soluble fiber acts completely differently than the refined starches in your toast or your instant oats. When soluble fiber enters your highly acidic stomach and mixes with water, it undergoes a physical phase change. It transforms into a thick, highly viscous, structural gel. This gel coats the inside of your gastrointestinal tract. It acts as a physical, mechanical barrier. Because this gel is so thick, it literally, physically slows down the rate at which your digestive enzymes can break down the carbohydrates in the beans. It slows down the absorption of glucose into your bloodstream. Instead of a violent, massive explosion of sugar entering your blood all at once, the glucose drips in slowly. A slow, steady, highly controlled release over the course of 4, 5, or 6 hours. Because the glucose enters slowly, there is no blood sugar spike. Because there is no spike, there is no violent panic from your pancreas. There is no massive insulin dump. Because there is no massive insulin dump, there is no crash. Your insulin stays flat. Your energy remains perfectly stable. You do not get the brain fog at 10:30 a.m. You do not get the ravenous cravings. You have perfectly flattened the glycemic curve, using the mechanical physics of a biological gel. Layer 4 is the architecture of your gut. Your stomach and your small intestine cannot digest that soluble fiber. You do not possess the enzymes required to break it down. So the fiber travels, completely intact, all the way down into your large intestine, your colon. Your colon is not an empty pipe. It is a massive, highly complex biological fermentation vat. It contains trillions of living bacteria. This is your microbiome. As you age, the diversity and health of your microbiome plummets. This loss of bacterial diversity is a primary driver of systemic inflammation, autoimmune disease, and cognitive decline in seniors. But when that thick, intact soluble fiber from the Roman bean bowl arrives in the colon, the bacteria feast. The fiber is a prebiotic. It is the exact, specific food source that the most beneficial, life-saving strains of bacteria require to survive. The bacteria ferment the fiber, and as a byproduct of this fermentation, they produce magical compounds called short-chain fatty acids, SCFAs. The most important of these is called butyrate. Butyrate is the primary energy source for the cells lining your colon. It repairs the tight junctions in your gut wall, preventing leaky gut syndrome. But more importantly, butyrate enters your bloodstream, travels throughout your body, and aggressively shuts down systemic inflammation. It even crosses the blood-brain barrier to protect the neural architecture of your brain from neurodegeneration. When you eat instant oatmeal and toast, the refined carbohydrates are entirely absorbed in the upper digestive tract. Nothing makes it to the colon. Your microbiome starves. The bacteria die. The inflammation rises. When you eat the Roman bean bowl, you are not just feeding your muscles. You are directly feeding a trillion-cell bacterial army that actively fights the biological aging process on your behalf. We must calibrate the science. I want you to know exactly how firmly established these mechanisms are in the medical literature, so you understand this is not a diet fad. The existence of anabolic resistance in older adults and the strict requirement for a high-dose protein pulse to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and prevent sarcopenia is the absolute gold standard of modern gerontological nutrition. It is unquestionable fact. The glycemic index of highly processed grains versus the slow, gel-forming absorption of legumes is foundational endocrinology. Soluble fiber flattens the glucose curve. This is an undeniable law of metabolic physics. The fermentation of soluble fiber by the microbiome to produce butyrate and lower systemic inflammation is the cornerstone of modern gastroenterology. And the forensic evidence from the gladiator graveyards in Ephesus, the high bone density, the strontium to calcium ratios proving a heavily plant-based, legume-rich *hortera* diet is established, peer-reviewed archaeological consensus. The endocrinology is real, the microbiology is real, the historical precedent is absolutely real. Now, stand perfectly still and recognize the sheer magnitude of the biological machinery you have been neglecting, and exactly what happens when you change the fuel source. Think about the massive, violent sugar spike of your current breakfast. Think about your pancreas screaming. Think about your muscles starving and eating themselves to survive. Imagine what happens tomorrow morning when you change the protocol. You eat a massive bowl of lentils, fava beans, olive oil, and sea salt. The massive pulse of plant protein hits your bloodstream. The leucine turns the ignition key. You shatter the anabolic resistance. Muscle protein synthesis is violently activated. Your body stops cannibalizing its own tissue and begins laying down new muscular architecture. The soluble fiber turns into a thick gel in your stomach. It acts as a physical barrier. The glucose drips slowly into your blood. The pancreas remains calm. The insulin curve stays completely flat. The brain fog disappears. You experience hours of grounded, stable, thermodynamic energy. The unbroken fiber reaches the colon. The microbiome feasts. The bacteria ferment the fiber and release massive amounts of butyrate into your bloodstream, repairing your gut wall and crushing the systemic inflammation in your joints. Protein synthesis, glycemic control, bacterial fermentation. 3 profound, intense, life-saving biological mechanisms running perfectly, simultaneously, cascading into one another to rebuild the resilience, strength, and structural integrity of the aging human machine. And all it requires is for you to stop accepting the pathetic, highly processed, sugar-coated lies sold to you in a cardboard box. Tomorrow morning, do not hesitate. Walk into the kitchen. Take the instant oatmeal, the toast, the juice, and the cereal. Throw them directly into the garbage can. Take a heavy cast iron pot, put it on the stove, boil water, add the lentils, add the fava beans, add a heavy pour of extra virgin olive oil, add the sea salt. Eat the Roman *pulse*. Stop feeding your body pure sugar disguised as medicine. Stop starving your muscles. Start feeding your body the structural, slow-burning, highly engineered architecture it actually needs to survive. Eat the exact fuel that powered the most lethal athletes in human history. Do not accept the withering decay of aging. Fight back. Eat the beans.